Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me remind you that we have a Mindspeak this Saturday at the Intercontinental. We're hosting His Excellency Bob Godek, who is the US Ambassador to Kenya, ahead of POTUS's visit. This will be a great way to set the scene. I'm looking forward to this immensely, and this morning as I was driving to work, I saw His Excellency jogging around Muthaiga with a tremendous escort of security, in point of fact, and I'm looking forward to this immensely. He is an elephant lover, a counter-terrorism expert, and he has really reset Kenya-US relations ahead of the President's visit. I took this photograph momentarily after I'd seen His Excellency the Ambassador having a jog. Sunrise in Muthaiga, good morning world, I tweeted. Terry Wirtz, Astro Terry, tweeted, "The last picture I took on this mission," and it's a very beautiful picture as well, so I'll put that up. Still reading Thomas Pynchon, who's so dense and difficult to read. You have to be wide awake. Can't just skim it. Perhaps history this century, thought Eigenvalue, is rippled with gathers in its fabric, such that if we are situated, as stencils seem to be, at the bottom of a fold, it's impossible to determine warp, woof, or pattern anywhere else. By virtue, however, of existing in one gather, it is assumed that there are others, compartmented off into sinuous cycles, each of which had come to assume greater importance than the weave itself, and destroy any continuity. Thus it is that we are charmed by the funny-looking automobiles of the 30s, the curious fashions of the 20s, the particular moral habits of our grandparents. We produce and attend musical comedies about them and are conned into a false memory, a phony nostalgia about what they were. We are accordingly lost to any sense of continuous tradition. Perhaps if we lived on a crest, things would be different. We could at least see. And one more quote from Pynchon: "There is no literature and art without paranoia. Probably there would be even civilization. Paranoia is the world. It is the attempt to make sense of what has not." Political reflections: China military conducts drills near Taiwan, Philippines. Chinese warships and aircraft on Wednesday passed through the Bashi Channel between Taiwan and the Philippines to carry out routine planned exercises in the Western Pacific. China's defense ministry said. China's increasingly assertive moves to press sovereignty claims in the East and South China Sea have rattled the region and aroused concern in Washington, though the country says it has no hostile intent. China has overlapping claims with the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Brunei in the South China Sea, through which $5 trillion in shipborne trade passes every day. My conclusions are it's becoming a tinderbox, and everyone is holding a match. Sputnik International tweeted, "Russia, China set area in Sea of Japan for joint Navy drills." They seem to be much more coordinated, China and Russia at the moment. And then I like this from the Hollering Stumpcom. China Air Force holds rare drills over Beijing no-fly zone. China is also urging an end to microphone diplomacy over US differences between the United States and China over the South China Sea and cybersecurity should not be addressed by microphone diplomacy, but in a proper way to allow for a successful US visit by President Xi Jinping this year. President Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping drink a toast at a lunch banquet in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, November the 12th, 2014. I'll put up that photograph. Apparently, Putin kept the Pope waiting and got told off by Francis on Ukraine. Pope Francis waited for more than an hour to tell Russian President Vladimir Putin to commit to peace and dialogue in the Ukraine. Putin kept the leader of 1.2 billion Catholics waiting for 70 minutes, a rare occurrence at the Vatican, at their first meeting in November 2013. He was 50 minutes late. That was about how long their second encounter lasted. Meeting apparently got off to a chilly start. Francis looked solemn as he greeted Putin in German with a simple welcome in his study at the Apostolic Palace. Putin, who picked up the language as a KGB agent in East Germany, responded with a gesture of thanks. The two men sat on opposite sides of the Pope's desk, gazing at each other in silence as they waited for journalists and photographers to leave. Once alone, they cut to the chase. On Ukraine, the Holy Father stated the need to commit to a sincere and great effort to achieve peace, and it was agreed it was important to rebuild a climate of dialogue and that all parties commit to enforce the Minsk Accords. Peskov said the papal meeting was very friendly, and Putin saw Francis as a profound person, as do I. Putin left the Vatican in a black stretch Mercedes limousine at the head of a 13-vehicle motorcade, just in time for a quick powwow at the airport with an old friend, ex-Premier Silvio Berlusconi. Put up a photograph of him exchanging gifts with the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, at the palace. That was yesterday. Moving on, Global Economic Prospects Report. This is a World Bank biannual report, very interesting. They predict the world global economy would expand 2.8% this year. This is ratcheted down from a 3% outlook in January. India is recording the biggest growth of major economies for the first time, ahead of a slowing China. Moving on, Jamie McGeever at Reuters tweeted, Yanis sends Wolfgang his love too. You'll see what I mean when I put up the photograph. Currency markets, when I walked in this morning, as it's every morning, the euro was at 113.07. Now it's at 112.50. Dollar index was at 94.815. It must be a lot higher. Japanese yen was 123.20, now 123.48. Swissy, 0.9322 this morning. The pound, 154.52. That's dropped quite sharply. The Aussie, 0.7763 when I looked last. South Korean, India rupee, 63.795. South Korean won, when I looked this morning, was barely budged after the rate cut. It was last trading at 11.0770. And they eased, cutting their rate to a record low of 1.5% to offset the potential impact of an outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome. Yesterday, Kuroda comments sent the dollar tumbling against the yen, and we're currently at 123.47. New Zealand dollar slid more than 2% today, to a 5-year low of 0.7010 after the Reserve Bank of New Zealand cut rates to 3.25%. The Kiwi took a further hit as the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, which had hiked rates just last year, joined the global rate cutting club and said it would ease again if needed. The RBNZ has again proved to be more flexible than the market gives it credit for. Eric Hunsader tweeted, New Zealand currency pairs react violently at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll put up that image. I'll put up a 5-day chart of the New Zealand dollar. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. I'm not throwing in the towel with the dollar yet. Euro dollar, as I said, 112.51. It had gained before this today's sell-off 1.7% this week, on a spike in Eurozone debt yields, particularly the Bund. German benchmark 10-year Bund yields topped 1% overnight for the first time since September. And where the Bund goes, so goes the euro. If the yields back up, the euro gets a bid. Holger Schapitz tweeted, Bund sell-off deepens, 10-year Bund yields jump to 105%. I'll put up that image for you as well. Hunt Seda, wide swings in currencies this morning. This was from yesterday. Chart of the major pairs since midnight. I'll post that for you. And he also has posted a very interesting image chart of E-mini depth of book during flash crash. Our filter shows Sarao's algo in bright red. And note that he stopped the algo before the crash, but I don't know what Eric is going to conclude from that. Very interesting piece in Bloomberg, how the legendary Birkin bag remains dominant, talking about Hermes opening its Miami Design District flagship on November the 6th. Local clients will find a selection of leather goods, fashion and accessories chosen specifically for them. Every Hermes outpost is run like an independent boutique, with a store director who visits Paris each year to buy pieces he or she believes will appeal to the location's particular flavor. But certain items resonate. No matter where in the world they land, consider the Birkin Cellier 40, the latest version of what a casual observer might call the original It bag. Crafted out of what is called hunter cowhide, holds its shape without much manipulation. The 40-centimeter long style is unlined with raw edge straps, palladium hardware, and a retail price of $14,900. The Cellier 40 will be available in Miami, although available is a relative term. Birkins of all shapes, sizes and styles still sell out instantly, with wait lists typical of 10 or 15 years. Birkin really holds up, says Robert Chavez. Customers appreciate quality, craftsmanship and timeless style. Put up an image of it. Crude oil, again, when I checked this morning, and it might have sold down from here, was at $61.18, down 0.6% after jumping 2% on Wednesday. Gold, last time I looked, 1183 and change. Let's move on to sub-Saharan Africa. The World Bank put out this economic update of theirs, well worth a read. In sub-Saharan Africa, low oil prices have considerably reduced growth in commodity exporting countries. Angola, Nigeria also slowed activity in non-oil sectors. Although South Africa is expected to be one of the main beneficiaries of low oil prices, growth is being held back by energy shortages, weak investor confidence and policy uncertainty, and by the anticipated gradual tightening of monetary and fiscal policy. Growth in the region is forecast to slow to 4.2%, slower than previously expected. This mainly reflects a reassessment of prospects in Nigeria and Angola following the sharp drop in oil prices, and in South Africa because of ongoing difficulties in electricity supply. For 2016 to 2017, growth is expected to be only marginally higher, as these challenges partially offset stronger trading partner growth and a continued expansion in the region's low-income countries. They've also cut the global growth to 2.8% in 2015, less than the 3.2%. Less than the forecast in January. Interesting forecast for South Africa, forecasting for sub-Saharan Africa, forecasting 4.6% this year, 4.2% in 2015. 4.6% last year, 4.2% in 2015, and 4.6% the following year. Their forecast for South Africa is 1.5% for last year, 2% for this year, 2.1% for next year, for 2016. Angola is 4.4% for 2014 and 4.5% for this year. Deterioration in the terms of trade since 2011 had been large. Since 2014, the terms of trade decline in Chad has amounted to nearly 40%, my goodness, and between 10 and 20% in the DRC, Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone. This sets back growth as export and commodity-related fiscal revenues fall. These negative effects will be likely reinforced by rising volatility in commodity terms of trade. for June for 2015 to 2017, growth in LICs on average is expected to remain above 6%. And then there's plenty of detail about Angola and Nigeria, and there is a report where they are effectively predicting growth across the continent. DRC and Ethiopia were the standouts, to be honest. Sierra Leone, Guinea see spike in Ebola cases, so that's not a good sign. UN deploys troops, helicopters to back Congo in fight with the rebels. Attack helicopters, drones to support a campaign by DRC's army against rebels in the northeast of the country, the head of its UN peacekeeping mission said on Wednesday. Very interesting article, but we know these facts about South Sudan running out of money, which along with the civil war and mass food shortages is putting the world's youngest country at risk of becoming its youngest failed state. South Sudanese government has run through its cash reserves and is trying to pay for a war with credit and a trickle of oil money. There is no money left in the central bank. There is no money left in the treasury. The government can no longer pay for the most basic things, said Toby Lanza. The central bank has been printing money to keep up, so now inflation is skyrocketing. The price of sugar has doubled in the past 2 months, while the price of beans has more than doubled. Fuel prices have shot so high that companies that bottle water in the capital city of Juba have closed because it costs too much to power their filtration systems. In May, Parliament shut down a session because there was no fuel to power the generator. The lack of money is raising the risk of new fault lines in the fighting between the government and the rebels, a splintering of the military into factions along former militia lines that would make it exponentially harder to negotiate a peace deal. These forces will go freelance. They'll either put themselves up to the highest bidder, or if no one can bid, then they will just help themselves. This is Alex Dawal, a South Sudan expert at Tufts University. I concluded by saying it's mad, mutually assured destruction. Intra-African trade to hike to $3 trillion after African blocs agreement, says COMESA. That compares to $1.3 trillion at the moment. This is the Secretary General of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, Sindiso Ngwenya. South African oil shares up 4.39% year to date. Dollar rand around the 12.34 level when I checked last. Egyptian stock market is down 3.215% so far this year. The Nigerian oil shares down 3.44% so far this year. It's all turned a little bearish, I'm afraid. Ghana's Stock Exchange Composite Index, ironically, is the best performing index. One of the best. It's up only 5.26%, but it's outperforming a lot of its peers. Filth swamps Ghana capital in floods as regular as rainy season. Rokia Gedle has lived for 23 years in a blue wooden shack without a bathroom or kitchen in Ghana's capital, Accra. She has raised 6 children here. She can't remember not having her home flooded in the rainy season. This year was the worst, said Gedle. A 50-year-old shopkeeper who lost a fridge, TV, cash and clothes to floods last week. I didn't realize the water was still going up until my eldest daughter said we should run outside. Moving on, let's come to Kenya. World Bank is forecasting Kenya GDP for 2014 to be 5.3%, 6% in 2015, and 6.6% in 2016. Barclays Africa, and this is have bought a stake in First Assurance for 2.9 billion shillings, acquiring a controlling stake in Kenya's First Assurance. Announced it is buying a 63.3% stake in the insurance firm, will pay 2.2 billion. And there's been this very big move by the banks into bank assurance. Kenya shilling last trading at 96.99, obviously the bigger than expected rate rise is supporting. Nairobi all share is down 0.14% year to date. The NSE 20 is down 7.198% year to date and at a 27-month closing low. Remember, if you want to keep the market on your laptop, just register on rich.co.ke, get a password, and then go to Rich Live. And then don't forget this Saturday we've got Bob Godek in the house. Saturday morning we serve breakfast from 9:30 at the Intercontinental, and we start our programme by 10 and we finish up around 12. So I hope to see you there. Once again, thank you for stopping by.